you find adventure at the click of a button, or from the turn of a page, or the casting of a die. Join your hosts, Coniff and Shiloh, on an unforgettable journey. Questing the Multiverse.
Welcome to episode 30 of Questing the Multiverse. I'm one of your hosts, Shiloh, coming to you from the Fey Realm of Cicada Town.
I'd be curious to hear, after this episode's done and all that stuff, all the effects and the EQ and all that jazz is put on it, if the listener can hear in the background the forest, the sounds of the wildlife outside Shiloh's window.
Yeah, I can still hear it through my headphones now that you mention it, but it'll be interesting to see. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah,
folks,
yeah,
so
that's fair.
For another month and a half, probably.
Unless the world ends tomorrow after the eclipse. So.
Yeah, we are on Eclipse Eve.
Tomorrow.
I will not be seeing it. My parents are driving to where I was born, where our friend Jibbs lives, in Terre Haute, Indiana, to go see the eclipse. So yeah. I will not see it. I saw it 7 years ago. It was in its pathway.
It was 7 years ago, wasn't it? Was that really 7 years ago?
Yeah, 2017, I think, was the last one.
I did see that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, and I wasn't in like totality. Is that the word they use?
Yeah.
So I just, I get it. It's neat. It's a neat phenomenon, but
Yep. If you happen to miss it, you happen to miss
shrug.
it.
Yeah.
They're retired, so they get to do things like that. So if you hear a dog as well, then that would be the family dog. So not only am I in Fey Realm,
those are the dire wolves, or the dire wolf,
but I've got a dire wolf that weighs about 10 pounds.
Here's an icebreaker question for you, and I think we maybe touched on this at one point. If you, maybe in like an early episode, but if you could live anywhere in Faerun, perhaps doing what you do now, right? Like you're a chef, like a master chef at a tavern, and you also woodwork and make whatever. You could even make bows, right? Like who knows, like what it would fit in your tables, chairs, what have you. Yeah. Where would you live in Faerun?
That's a good question.
Would you go Sword Coast, or is there a grander, deeper knowledge?
Probably because it's probably the safest area for humans, I guess. I don't really know.
Which of the three cities, then, if you had to pick? Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter, or Waterdeep?
Oh, that probably Waterdeep, I guess. That would probably be the best place for commerce.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting town. Well, one of the bigger, if not the biggest city in Faerun. I don't know if there hasn't been a census put out in the Forgotten Realms, so I don't really know what the population. You'll have to ask Ed Greenwood on that one. I'm sure there'll be some. Well, actually, the population of. Sorry, I missed that memo. I was too concerned about other things in life, but yeah, it's probably going to be Waterdeep. Maybe I make kids' toys or something like.
Yeah.
Tops or something like that. I don't know.
There was a character that did that in Divinity Original Sin 2, though that character had...
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? They had a bit more nefarious things going on.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. He wasn't a good person.
I did want to say, before you take us away with kind of the start of the episode, I did, and this is, I don't want to hit the book club or the book report button, because this would be really short, and we're going to do that later anyway. But I did finish, and you might find this interesting, what is it called? Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves: The Road to Neverwinter. It is the prequel book to the Honor Among Thieves movie. It's short. It's only like 279, 280 some odd pages. But it follows Edgin and Holga and how they meet. And it follows their adventures on how they basically go from the two of them plus Kira to Forge and Simon becoming the little petty thief crew that they become, and obviously sets the stage for the Honor Among Thieves movie. And I really enjoyed it. It was a very just fun, lighthearted read in the same tone as the movie. And more importantly, I think, like, you know how in the beginning of Honor Among Thieves, Edgin is telling his backstory, and that's a whole bit in and of itself, as you know. Jonathan would really love to hear this this part of the story. Is he coming? No. So anyway, aside from that bit, like where you meet all the people and kind of their importance to the story, this book really fleshes that out. So it really gives a lot of page time to Edgin and Holga, Kira. Even gives page time to Forge. It gives page time to when and how they find Simon. And it develops those characters into this little band family or whatever. And ultimately, I think it makes some of the, no spoilers here, but some of the stuff that happens in Honor Among Thieves a little more tragic. So it's a very easygoing D&D book. If you happen to see it somewhere like a library or it's cheap, I would pick it up. I think you would enjoy it, at least as from like a, just like, you don't want something super deep, you don't want something that's going to require a 5-book investment to finish a whole story. Like, it's just a one-off, 280 pages, fun, almost like you're reading a D&D campaign. So
nice.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I had it on my list to read this year as kind of like and here's the cover. I guess I could do this for our YouTube audience, since it's sitting right next to me.
Chris Pine.
Yeah. I didn't really care I don't really know or care about him. But I think he did an incredible job in the movie. So,
oh yeah.
But yeah, so it was going to be just like a random little read this year. And then I ended up really liking it more than I expected to. So I don't know, but that's my short, not a book report.
Nice. All right. Well, should we talk about something that got dropped unexpectedly, to say the least?
Yeah, out of the blue.
And yeah, that is that Guild Wars 3 is sort of possibly happening. We don't really know for certain, but it certainly appears to be a thing. For those that don't know, there was a shareholders meeting over in Korea with NCSoft, ArenaNet's parent company, that ArenaNet makes Guild Wars 1 and 2. And evidently, the shareholders were not very pleased with NCSoft, as shareholders generally aren't pleased with companies that aren't making hand over fist money.
Which does say something maybe about Throne and Liberty, because that's an NCSoft game. And
yes. And evidently hasn't done that well in Korea, although I think it's stabilized, and they're releasing an open beta soon here in the States, and we'll have to wait and see how that plays out here. But we'll, I don't know. But nevertheless, this is not about Throne and Liberty, but about the announcement of Guild Wars 3. So NCSoft has other MMO. They're particularly, I think they really only release MMOs. from what I can think of, lineage to the
Arcade.
Ion.
No, it was Ion. That's what it was.
Blade and Soul, I believe. And most of them are much bigger in Korea and in the East than they are here in the States. Certain ones have taken off at launch and then kind of petered down to either free to play or whatever. ArenaNet's really the only one that is kind of held firm in the West, and that's because of their kind of independent studio. They have a vision for their IP. They've stuck with their guns, and they're probably kind of like Final Fantasy XIV, which we'll get to later, is Square Enix's bread and butter. I would almost argue to say that Guild Wars 2 and, well, what used to be Guild Wars 1 probably right now is NCSoft's bread and butter, at least over here in the West. Guild Wars 2's numbers have been on the up and up.
Yes, definitely its most successful MMO, I'd think, worldwide at least.
Yeah, and definitely critically acclaimed, I would say.
Yeah.
And so this announcement basically came off the shareholders asking about, I guess the main CEO for NCSoft was on a trip. So this other guy, I can't pronounce his last name. His first name is Park. And he was asked about the NCSoft West, which, resides over U.S., Canada, maybe even Europe, and why the NCSoft West lead person, whatever you want to call it, the president, I don't know.
The head honcho.
the head honcho, the big cheese.
Yep.
But this guy Park is the co-CEO. But he was basically just kind of casually name dropped Guild Wars 3 while discussing the franchise and what ArenaNet has to offer. Basically citing that they had a tremendous amount of credibility within the community. I think there's a lot of talk about NCSoft's reputation over the years as being basically a lot of free to play, pay to win, that sort of thing. And that Guild Wars 1 and 2, or mainly Guild Wars 2, because it's the most recent, most, I don't know if you'd say, I guess prominent we'll just say prominent. Definitely kind of almost debunks that to a degree. That they were, ArenaNet was kind of, it's basically placating a lot of shareholders with a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of CEO, shareholder stuff, basically just trying to say, hey, hold on, give us a shot here. It just kind of trying to douse some fires is basically what this guy is doing.
Yeah.
And basically just name dropped Guild Wars 3 was in possible in the works with ArenaNet. So this obviously broke, and the internet kind of, I'm not going to say exploded. It's Guild Wars 2. As much as Guild Wars 2, it definitely exploded in my little feed because it was all over the map with Mighty Teapot dropping streams about it, and eventually Muckluck dropping streams about it. And I know MMORPG has talked about it, and I think Bree wrote an article about the whole thing. I got a lot of the information that I kind of went to was Fornax, the Crichton Herald, had a video about it, and basically saying that the arena is basically not confirmed nor denied that this is a thing. So they're playing kind of that political spin on it and just saying, well, we can that whole that whole thing. So it's like, well, okay, that probably means if they're not going to deny it, it probably means that they have at least something is in the works. Now, I don't know if you have any thoughts so far on this, but I was going to ask you what your thoughts about what could this possibly be. Will it be anything? And if it is, what would you like to see out of this possible Guild Wars 3? Obviously, it probably won't reach the light of day, at least for 5 years. That would be my guess. Unless it's something different than a full-fledged, remap, reskin, all new game, like they did from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2. For people that don't know, that Guild Wars 1 was mainly a kind of an RPG hub, and you would group up and go on these little expeditions, and that was basically Guild Wars 1. Yeah. Guild Wars 2 is a fully immersive open world MMO with a huge emphasis on open world maps and meta events and
group
real
content,
all that kind of stuff. So
from a corporate perspective, I would say there's probably not much in the works with Guild Wars 3 outside of conceptual things.
Yeah.
Because of the nature in which this was mentioned, in a board meeting. If we take a look at how Riot Games does their game development, they have this sort of, I don't remember the exact term they use, but it's like a planning or, it was like this specific word that had a lot of weight to it. It's like their planning and their philosophy phase, where they're determining what is this game need to be before they've ever put code to an asset or whatever, and things are actually
conceptualizing
being worked
the whole
on.
concept. Yeah.
And so they've got, they work on things in that department where it's like, we're going to spend a lot of time here planning and dreaming about what this could be. And then the work begins if we come up with something in this section that we think has legs. And so I don't know how ANET works, and since what's odd is this isn't coming from ANET, it's coming from NCSoft. So it's the publisher or whatever. Very clearly, ANET is concerned with putting out Guild Wars 2 content, especially with their new plan on how they're delivering that content over the course of a year. Obviously, kind of we talked about this once upon a time, like moving into the ESO methodology of little content drops throughout the year. To keep on a consistent schedule rather than this, it was several years between Path of Fire and End of Dragons, and then boom, they drop these big content drops. So I would wonder if this is the idea. The nice thing is they're thinking about it, but I don't think that they've got a ton going on with it. I think maybe the idea is we like Guild Wars 1, we liked Guild Wars 2. I would argue, and maybe you would agree with me, that they probably could have stopped putting new content into Guild Wars 2 after the End of Dragons and the end of the Dragon Cycle and all that, because that felt like a complete experience. I mean, you're going from the beginning and Zaitan all the way to the end in Suwon, and that covers all the dragons. That covers a pretty really the history of it's Tyria, right? I'm getting all these fake worlds mixed up in the head. And so it would have made some sense then to kind of put out, but they still want to support the game, and it was getting popular because WoW was kind of taking a dip at the time. So I get, it's hard to say what they should have done. But I do wonder, you kind of see two things at odds. You hear these rumors of Guild Wars 3, but then you also hear this, this support that Guild Wars 2 is getting. And it's kind of like, is this a thing? Wouldn't those things be at odds? As far as what I'd like to see, like someday I think a new Guild Wars would be great. But I would say the same thing about a new World of Warcraft, a new Star Wars MMO. We've said it about Lotro and maybe this new Amazon Lord of the Rings MMO. Hopefully it lives up to what Lotro's already done. And that's kind of where I would feel about Guild Wars 3. The one thing, and I was talking with Weevil, our good friend Weevil, about this last night, is that like Guild Wars 2 has a sort of stylistic approach to it, where like it doesn't, you look at like End of Dragons or Path of Fire, it kind of ages a little, better than you'd expect. And so you'd almost want Guild Wars 3 to go into it with that stylistic approach, whether that's the watercolor thing or maybe just a slightly more cartoonish vibe. And I've always, ever since someone made the case on like why WoW has stood the test of time, or why people are flocking still to old school RuneScape when it looks like a 2004 game, it's because it's that nostalgic factor and it's form over, or function and mechanics over the beauty of it. And obviously, as you know, WoW looks great even today. Like the old stuff, maybe not so much, but like Dragonflight is in the same style. It looks really good, but it's cartoony. So I would hope that Guild Wars 3 would stay with that rather than try to build something super. Like you can utilize, like for instance, Fortnite's utilized Unreal Engine 5. Obviously, like Epic owns both of those things. And so it's utilizing the God rays, the ray tracing, all the other stuff that us normal folk that don't understand game design don't really see. Like it's utilizing that engine, and though it's stylized and cartoony, it looks really good. Like when I'm running Fortnite on max settings, like it looks good. Now, one could also say that like it'd be really neat to see Guild Wars 3 and Tyria in a more new world approach with like trying to go more realistic graphics or what have you. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like mechanically, like the answer for you and I is going to be, we just want more Guild Wars 2. Like the mechanics of Guild Wars 2, I feel like are fine. The combat's great. I enjoy all the mounts, the jumping puzzle, like the jumping mechanics are the best in any MMO. Like the way the classes play is fun. I'm not a huge fan of crafting. I like the legendary crafting piece, but like how solvable crafting is and how like you don't really craft unless you're going for like a legendary weapon. So maybe there's some things here and there that we could nitpick, but yeah, overall I'd say keep Guild Wars 2 what it is, but maybe put it in a new engine, stylize the graphics again, but make it modern. And then ultimately I would want to just go into the future of Tyria and see what comes next. If you didn't know, Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 are about 250 years apart. That was another thing that I was looking up yesterday for our Weevil and I's conversation, or maybe Jeff and I's conversation. I don't know. So that's a pretty big gap, right? I wouldn't mind seeing another gap and go way into the future. Maybe that would mean we would get more of a sci-fi approach if Cantha ends up, opening up to everyone and trading, and their Jade technology gets combined with, at this point that far in the future, Timey would be some legendary Azuran architect or whatever, and you know what I mean. So that'd be fun to see. But I don't know. Yeah, I hope they make it. I think that we're going to get to a point where all these old MMOs are going to start to feel old because
they're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
I guess that's what my thought process on this Guild Wars 3 could mean. Because I don't know what exactly they could do, but I do know what they probably should do if they want to make a lot of money, or what I think could make them a lot of money, and that's basically reinvent the franchise with Guild Wars 2.
Yeah. Basically
just upping Guild Wars 2, put it in Unreal 5, keep, a lot of the I don't know game design at all, so I don't know if this is even possible, but just updating the graphics, keeping the essential Guild Wars 2 experience, basically all the expansions, everything would basically be in place, ported over to consoles.
That's a thing too, yeah. I would like
because it would lend really very, very, very well to both PlayStation and Xbox, and either maybe scrap the model that they have going for them right now and then go back to these big expansions. And I don't know, but just basically reinventing Guild Wars 2 and slap a Guild Wars 3, kind of almost like what Destiny did, I suppose, with Destiny 2, although hopefully in a better, more well-received direction. Because Destiny 2 was not very well received, I don't think, by the Destiny community because people were still playing Destiny 1 and enjoying the hell out of it, and all of a sudden they announced Destiny 2 and people are like, whoa, wait, hold on. And
I wasn't done yet.
Yeah. So but with 5 years, I mean, you're going on close to, I mean, I'm 5 years pretty, if it is a completely new Guild Wars 3, that would be pretty quick.
Yeah.
You would be going on 15, 16, possibly 17 years at that point. And yeah, like you said, a lot of these older MMOs, either you have the money to redo everything like WoW has with graphical updates and things like that for the newer expansions. The older zones still look a little suspect, but I mean, you can kind of tell just by WoW and how they've progressed over the years by going through starter zones from vanilla WoW all the way up to Dragonflight. So hopefully they can do something like that. And maybe this reskin is a lot cheaper than doing a lot of this stuff. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a game designer, so. But yeah, I hope they keep, I know a lot of people have been like, well, what if all of a sudden they just completely switch gears? Because they did something similar to Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2. It was a completely different game. They went more the MMO route. But when they did go the MMO route, they didn't go the traditional EverQuest WoW that direction. They were like, we're just going to do something completely different, and they forged their own path. So it would be interesting to see like what would this new path be for them, and I hope it's something that I would want to play because I don't know, the whole shareholding and NCSoft, and it really kind of troubles and worries me a little bit. But
yeah, because they're that whole concept, like an earnings call, whatever it is that got leaked on. Like, the purpose of that is to tell the stakeholders and the shareholders, this is what we're doing to make you money. And so it's, when you look at it from that perspective, it's the game is not being made or even being considered because people love Guild Wars 2. It's being considered because they're looking at, well, what do we do to secure the future of this company? And of course, that stuff's going to get in the way of the art and the passion of bringing Tyria to life. And that's all, it'll be curious to see if what we're seeing with WoW is also driven by the same mindset now that WoW Blizzard answers to Microsoft and they need a return on that 78 billion or whatever it was investment. I mean, was it billion? I don't know. It had to have been billion. Know. That game's worth more than $78 million. So all I can say is I don't know. It's something it's a nice thing to consider, and it's nice to know that is being considered and that the future of Guild Wars franchise is being discussed, but
yeah,
we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, there's always been some sort of a talk about ArenaNet had something going on, and a lot of people were speculating, well, maybe they're going to work on something completely different than Guild Wars. Well, according to this, probably not. And that's okay with me. But it's just interesting to see what direction they could put. Maybe it'll be a first-person shooter. I'm just kidding. Hopefully.
An extraction shooter. That's the new thing.
Some damn battle royale survival. Never
rock band. No, I do love me some Fortnite Festival. All right, well, let's move on to the next topic of discussion. Does it make you want to just fire up your character, Shiloh, and jump in? Out of the frying pan and into the fire of MMO discussion. Not really. There's no fire. But from Guild Wars 2 to Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I think... Well, Guild Wars 3, I guess, was the whole point. Final Fantasy XIV... I really like the game. We talked about it a bit last year. A few episodes, 1 or 2. And at the time, I was really the only one diving into it. And we had kind of talked that, like, I see myself playing this game off and on, WoW off and on, Guild Wars 2 off and on, just because it's like those three, in my opinion, are kind of like the pinnacle of the MMO experience that you can play today at this moment. I'm sure there's many people out there that would throw ESO into that category. You know what? I'll give you that. But for me specifically, my personal tastes, WoW, Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars 2. I had a 3 there. It's a sign. Guild Wars 2. No. And of course, as I mentioned, I was really the only one focusing on it when we did those episodes. Well, now Xbox has fully released Final Fantasy XIV. And so if you play on Xbox, if you're a listener here and your primary console is Xbox, you can go play Final Fantasy XIV right now. You do have to sub. This is the old era of MMOs. You want to play, you got to pay the time. And whatever. That doesn't bother me anymore like it maybe once did. And so the pendulum has swung back the direction of Final Fantasy XIV, at least for a few of us. I know you're back in it a little bit here and there when you're not super busy. Our good friend from the ESO days, Reaper, he is hardcore into it now. I'm back on it. Tempest is back on it. And it makes a lot of sense, ultimately, because in just 2-3 months' time, we're going to have the brand new Dawn Trail expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, which I did pre-order, Shiloh. I wanted those pay-to-win earrings for the extra 30% XP boost.
I'm still waiting for the Bob Ross hair for my
Bob Ross
Pictomancer or whatever.
So the Pictomancer is, just a little aside before we really dive into what we've been doing. Pictomancer, that's one of the new classes, right? That's like the painting one that I see in all this.
Yeah, the new job, yeah.
I know that Tempest was extremely lukewarm on that. He's probably going to send me a message as soon as he hears this saying, well, no, I wasn't. But Tempest, if you were, I think you were. But I think it looks really cool. It's obviously something that's like, okay, really? Like painting? How is that combat? Really? Like, I mean, Dancer was pushing it, right? But like pictograph painting?
Yeah.
What? But what I like in MMOs, I mean, think the Mesmer of Guild Wars 2. I like those weird off-the-wall things that you can't experience. I think that's why I like Monk in World of Warcraft so much. Monk is not a new concept in an MMO or a game like that. You know, it's a class in D&D. But of all the classes, like Monk just it feels a little bit unique or out there. It's not your classic ranger. It's not your classic fighter, your paladin, your magic user. It's Monk.
Yeah.
And so in the same capacity, this Picto, whatever you said.
Yeah. I've grown to go, okay, probably for the same reasons you just mentioned, over the Viper class, which is a dual wield, probably a little bit more, you know, edgy, well, excuse the pun, but the Pictomancer, when I watched like the full length trailer that actually showed some of the Pictomancer stuff going on, that I think it's Krill, which you'll meet later. I think it was her that was doing the Pictomancer stuff.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe it's a Lalafell, so they, you know, I don't mean to be racist to Lalafells, but they all look the same. But anyway, I'm pretty sure it was Krill. She had Krill's outfit on, but anyway.
Okay.
But some of the stuff that this Lalafell was doing with painting and stuff, of course, it wasn't combat related, so I have to wait and see, like, what's this going to look like during combat? Is it just going to look... Of course, the Dancer looks pretty cool, and it's mainly a DPS support buff class.
Apparently it's a ranged class too. I didn't realize that.
Well, yeah, Pictomancer is going to be a magic
range?
Magic DPS, yeah.
Okay.
Magic range DPS. So, and I'm sure that it maybe it will be sort of that Dancer on the magic side.
Yeah.
So it'll be kind of a magic version of the Dancer, which is kind of a physical, I guess you would consider dancing physical range DPS, and the Pictomancer could be magical range DPS. So I don't know. And then the Viper would be melee DPS. So I don't know. It looks fun, interesting at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. Time will tell, but pretty excited, I suppose. I haven't pre-ordered it yet, but like I said, I'm waiting on the Bob Ross hair for my for my Makote.
Oh goodness! I was telling a friend today, so that Moose fellow that we're eventually, once War Within comes out, I think going to try a Mythic Plus group with. He's, you know, I do board game nights with him every other Friday, and I was selling him hard on Final Fantasy XIV. One, that it's like only $23 right now to get everything that exists except for Dawn Trail. And so that's really a good... It literally, by the time you're listening to this episode, that deal is done, just so you know, listener. But for Shiloh, like I was talking to him day of recording and selling him on this game. We're trying to. And the biggest thing, you know, was that like all of these classes that you see, you can do on a single character. So if you get bored of a class, you're like, I'm going to try something new. You go and do that. And for me, I love that. But why that is particularly important here is that I really have been enjoying Samurai, getting into like what I've been doing in the game. I unlocked Samurai, hit level 50, finished the main story quest, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment. But with these new classes, it's really appealing to me that you can just get on your usual character and go try these out. All the stuff you've already got, you know, all the Aethernet crystals that are already attuned to, you just all this progression that you've already worked on, and then you can go and try this new one out. And for me, I think once I get to the appropriate level, although I really like Samurai, but once I get to the appropriate level, I do want to try out Dancer. It just seems weird and out there, and that's always kind of what I gravitate towards in MMOs these days, or any class these days, any game that has classes these days, just for a unique experience, I think. So,
yeah.
So Dancer, Pictographer, whatever you said, maybe Viper.
It's Pictographer. I think it's Pictomancer.
Pictomancer
like
sounds smarter. So
yeah, even if it's wrong, it just sounds better.
Shiloh said it smart.
Yeah, I said it, so therefore it's real smart.
SMRT.
What have I? Oh, so I've been getting back into it. I've been kind of in MMO. Blah, I guess it's the best word probably for feels like months now, but
that's like you've been to them all, you've seen them all, you've done it. Like if you're at that tipping point of like, do I really want to go and finish all of this content in insert game name here? And I feel you on that. So I totally get it.
Yeah. And that's the thing I probably have, and except I haven't done the past 2 ESO expansions because I'm pretty well done with that. And I still have to get through the inner Naos part of Guild Wars 2,
Me too.
the newer story, a little bit that they've released. But other than that, I'm just kind of like, we'll just hold off until probably the War Within. So the most logical thing for me at the time was like, well, we'll just get back into Final Fantasy XIV, and all it really took was me watching you and Tempest and Reaper all together doing a dungeon. I'm like, yeah, that looks like, even if I'm like, I've seen this, but I'm like, yeah, that does look like it could be fun. Because I played it by myself and got through all the way to Shadowbringers basically by myself. So,
and the nice thing is the game does support that. You can play entirely solo, and the LFG, or the Duty Finder for Final Fantasy terminology, works really well. Every single group I've joined, even if I have put into chat, hey, I've never done this before, everybody is extremely kind and helpful. And that is a rare thing in MMOs these days.
And it has a built-in system with the sprout and then the flower, and then eventually you get, or I don't remember, but the different levels of your progression, I suppose, and a little symbol that's beside your name will kind of indicate how new or unnew you are. So people at least have an idea, even if you've done the dungeon 5 or 6 times. If you are a sprout, people will generally be pretty kind, and for the most part, I mean, obviously there are underlying people out there, but the community as a whole is pretty supportive, and it's no big deal if you screw something up, or it's like, well, sort of like Guild Wars 2 in that regard. People help you out, and
like I did Terra Deepcroft. So this is a little bit of an aside because I was not expecting this, but apparently, you unlock these hard mode versions of the base game dungeons, right? And they've got quests to do them. And this one specifically related to a character that you meet very early on in the main story quest. Well, really not a few characters, a group of adventurers that come back from some failed adventure, and one of their party has died, and it's this whole ordeal. And that was this minor little situation that pops up in the main story quest as your character's like, just here to have, adventure. And then, so didn't think anything of it for literally probably like dozens and dozens of hours of gameplay. So finally, you get to 50, you beat the main story quest. Now you can go and unlock all these level 50 hard modes. And one of them is for this Tam Terra Deepcroft. And the quest, and I wasn't paying much attention to it, but I did notice that, oh yeah, this is like, this is one of those guys that was in that adventuring party. And they talk about how, like, you know, he's got this, like they saw the person that died or something, and all this, and there's this mystique to it, and I'm like barely paying attention to it, and I go and get the quest, and I go to the location of the dungeon, and there's cutscenes, and I'm again not paying attention, and I unlock that from the duty finder. Well, then I sat on it for like a week, and just yesterday I was like, I'm gonna go do this because it's just gonna throw me in the duty finder. I'm gonna get people that know what they're doing. It's gonna be fine. That is exactly what happened, right? Like, you know, go into this dungeon on hard mode. Admittedly, we did wipe on one of the middle boss, because none of us were like, yeah, or the two of us were like, admittedly, we don't know what the mechanics are here. And the tank was like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. You're just supposed to do this, this, and this. And that was it. And we passed, no problems after that. Well, after this experience, this cutscene happens, and it is like a straight up horror cutscene where this Lalafell dude like sees the ghost of their dead party member, their dead healer, off in like the distance, and the string, like the music starts picking up and all this, and it does like the jump scare stuff, and I was like, what is this game right now? So anyway, you know, that's a completely long tangent to talk about how, like, you know, I did all this solo. Like, you weren't on, Reaper wasn't on, Tempest wasn't on. I was able to use this LFG to do this dungeon. Yeah. And it was completely fine, and everybody was friendly, and I got a nice little freaky spook after the fact. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's all soloable, and
and the game rewards experienced players for doing that
yes.
sort of thing. So it's a win-win for everybody most of the time, I guess, but. Yeah, you can play it solo. In fact, you could argue that you can actually get through a lot faster if you are just playing solo, because you're probably going to be focused more on the main story, because it just takes you on a particular path and you can just follow that along rather than get detoured by squirrels and and stuff along the way.
Yep.
Or, you know, hey, you want to go do this dungeon? I got to do, you know, that sort of thing. That can prolong your trying to get from point at your efficiency with the game. But of course, you know, it's a game. It's not meant to be played efficiently.
Yeah. It honestly feels like you remember doing the base game of Guild Wars 2, and you would get to those quests where you needed to do like that dungeon, but nobody does those dungeons anymore. And so it was kind of this, oh, I got to get a group together, but then there's nobody looking for a group for those. And Guild Wars 2's group finder is admittedly not super great. This feels like a really decent version of that, like where they've integrated these dungeons into the storyline, into the main story quest. But then the duty finder, or in other terms, LFG, is really well done. And so it's nice to see that. And so you can play just entirely by yourself. And as Shiloh's saying, probably cruise right through it.
Yeah. Well, back to Guild Wars 3. That's what I would like to see in Guild Wars 3 is a better... A Final Fantasy XIV take on incorporating these dungeons into the storyline that makes organic sense telling the story, which is something that Guild Wars 2 in particular, I think their story is much more sensical and more grounded, I think.
Yeah.
And if they were to do that and then actually have means like in Final Fantasy XIV to where you could actually do these dungeons that they mentioned, you know, and incorporate those into the story and make it feel like this big epic thing. That's something that 14 does very, very well, is it makes you feel these, and maybe not so much in as far as where you are, but once you get to Heavensward, there are these big epic things that happen, and you just get thrown into some dungeons, some trials, some stuff that you were just like, whoa. It can't just left field, and you're just like, oh my God, okay. Well, you just quickly grab your mouse because you've been kind of on, relaxing with a cup of coffee, just watching cutscene after cutscene, and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh God.
I want to interject to say, when I was showing my friend today at my computer Final Fantasy XIV, he's like, yeah, really? I don't know much about it, but isn't this the game with like an hour and a half cutscene? And I was like, well, maybe, maybe a little bit. There is a wedding ceremony you can attend. So yeah, you're completely right. And like you said, like Guild Wars 2's dungeons are a little more grounded, and I really liked them. The problem is nobody wants to run them. And I guess, I don't know if they're required for story. I think one or two of them are. But some of the other ones,
any of them being required for story.
I thought the one at Catechus's Manor was, but that might have been specifically for zone. I don't know. There was something, and there was a reason that I had to go do it. I don't remember.
Might have been a point of interest too.
Yeah, but I really enjoy how they work those into Guild Wars or Final Fantasy XIV. And so that, we'll take a look now, maybe a real brief 5-10 minute look of just what are your overall thoughts on the base game, Shiloh? Now, and we're talking from creating a character all the way up to defeating the Ultima weapon. Spoiler alert, I guess, which of course the Ultima weapon, if you're a Final Fantasy person, is a pretty common named thing for a lot of Final Fantasy stuff, so I guess that's not too much of a spoiler. But as we for you, from that point to that point, what are your thoughts on base game? Because I'll say this, just my quick little thing, I already like post base game up to what I'm doing now, which is, basically post base game to the beginning of the first expansion. I already like that far more than the previous stuff. It's far more interesting. There's a little more political intrigue. It might help that the characters are more developed now because, you had to put in that work with the base game to get there. But what do you think? Overall thoughts?
Yeah, very similar. It's been years since I did the main story quest, the MSQ, but from what I remember, I just remember it being, I knew that it was going to be kind of a slog, and that's generally the consensus of what, but I guess if you take that into what Final Fantasy XIV, I guess originally released at launch, I can't even imagine what that game was. I don't even think it had a main story quest. I think it was just here's the game and here's some zones, go have fun and
go buy stuff and make us money.
Yeah, that game is not an open world game where you can just have fun like Guild Wars or New World even. You need direction or there's nothing there. Because the zones are the zones, they're interesting most of the time, but they're there to kind of not really explore. You're not out exploring the world.
But they changed that, don't they change that come DLCs? And that's kind of how you unlock flying, is by finding stuff in the world, I think. Yeah.
There's a little bit more exploration in the newer zones, but base game, near the end there, I enjoyed the story a lot more than, and it was a lot of character development, and there was character development with characters that you necessarily didn't like or didn't care for, but with that said, they do such a good job with that you end up either liking or dealing with the characters that you necessarily didn't like in the MSQ. So it's a necessary evil, I suppose. It felt a little... In particular, I am not a big JRPG fan at all. So the fact that I was actually having fun and enjoying myself with the game, and I think I played maybe 7 back in the day on a PS2 or 9 or something, and enjoyed that. But that's basically my experience with JRPGs. I just never got into them. Never really cared about any of them, and still don't really to this day. But I was actually enjoying it, and I kind of went along with the story. And like I said, the MSQ it served its purpose, and you get through it, and you're like, okay, well, it was a good introduction, and now I can get on
the
with
the main course.
And there's a lot more meat to eat, so you'll have that going on. So
yeah, the big piece of just picking out what you said is like a lot of the characters I'm just like, I don't really care. Like when you're playing the base game, I think those in particular for me were kind of the 3 leaders of each of the grand companies. So Merylweb, the elf chick, and Raban. He's fine. You just don't like, obvious, and the game is pointing you to care more about the scions, and so that's a part that's important. And they grow on you for sure. So that's nice. But now, and that's, that was the base game. Now, post base game, all of these characters, including those 3, have a little more flavor added to them, and it's a little more with the exception of Gridania lady. She's hardly been seen, but Merylweb and Raban and the Queen Lalafell chick. Like there's more political intrigue here. Like you find out in Ul'dah that the Sultanate does not have a lot of power, and her hands are tied. And then with Merylweb, you find out that like she's basically leading a city of Limsa Lominsa, which is full of pirates and stuff like this. And so you're just learning that they're not just these one-dimensional characters. There's a little more to them, and so that I really have enjoyed. But as far as the base game goes, it was just a ton of like a slog of like an introduction here and there. And frankly, once you hit 50, the Hildebrand quests open up, and that's all I need to say. Like like those are hilariously ridiculous and a ton of fun. And so far, those have been my favorite quests as well. But yeah, I've definitely, there was a time playing when I was playing in the fall. We did those 2 episodes or 3 episodes or whatever it was on it, where I was very much in the mindset of like, oh, this game is, oh man, like it's a grind. Yeah. I'm really feeling the grind. And now it's kind of opening up. I think it helps that I really enjoy Samurai, and that's I like the look. Even the Samurai quests have been fun. And so there's all these little things where it just feels more alive now that I'm not just trying to finish the base game. And so it makes me excited for what lies ahead. Heavensward, Shadowbringers, Endwalker. There's another one in there somewhere that I am forgetting.
Oh, yeah, Stormblood.
So yeah, I think we'll have more to say as we continue on. I think the Xbox thing is really good for the game. I mean, obviously, you're adding a ton of players to the player base, so that's good. But yeah, playing with Reaper and Tempest and you, like, it's nice because now you kind of get that old feeling of ESO of running a dungeon with competent people. And again, I'm not saying that the people that you just LFG in Final Fantasy XIV aren't competent, because they are. But it is different when you're able to communicate, and they're people that you've been playing with for a while. And so it's been really nice to get to experience some of that. Yeah. So I don't have much else right now. I'm a lot more invested in it now than I was last fall, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think that is the general populace consensus of that game is just get through the MSQ. And a lot of people are like, well, why do I have to get through the MSQ?
Like, it's a lot of stuff you have to do. Yeah, I get that. Sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, like, coming from a new player perspective, like, I really have to invest this much time and effort and to get through this part. I get it.
It's an MMO, like, I guess
you could buy, I think you can buy like a pass to get through the MSQ if you wanted to, but you wouldn't really understand probably a whole lot of what was going on. But yeah, it's a necessary evil, I suppose. But now you're in the clear. I guess you could say you still got a lot of story. I still have a lot of story left. I still have to get through Shadowbringers and Endwalker. I'm only 2 expansions ahead, but it's also all that filler between the expansions that takes some time too. So yeah, I guess my best advice is just maybe pick out another job or 2 that you like, that you can that you can level up, maybe just one more in between, because otherwise you're going to be like level 60 something going into Heaven's Ward. So
not at this moment. I'm only level 54 still, and I've done a good, I don't know how much there is, but I feel like I've done a huge chunk of it. Because it feels like leveling has slowed down a lot, but again, like, this is the thing too, is I'm reminding myself that so far I have literally only spent time in Thanalan, the Shroud, and then the Luminza area, right?
Lenoskia,
and those are all the base. And then there's the Corythus, and then Mordana, but Mordana is really small, and Corythus is looking at the map, it's like there's 5 different dungeons, and then there's this place that's Heavensward that I can't get into, and that's pretty much it. But it's fun. So I've been just stuck to these zones, and if you zoom out on the map and start looking at all the other places that you'll get to go in the expansions, and you see how big those zones are. Like, if you look at like the map of Gridania, like, those zones are tiny compared to some of the zones of the expansions, and that could be that they were designed with flight in mind, all the stuff. So it's just very exciting. It reminds me, I feel like I am at the same place I was when I was working through Living World Season 1 with the Scarlet stuff, and then more Living World Season 2. But that era, before I had ever touched Heart of Thorns in Guild Wars 2, and then obviously, Living World Season 3, Path of Fire, Living World Season 4, 5, and then End of Dragons. So I feel like I'm in that era where I still have so much to learn, so much to explore, but it's starting to be really fun. And I look for, like, I get off of work and I'm like, I'm looking forward to just jumping in for a bit and doing a quest here or there. So or spending time at the Golden Saucer.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to actually getting one of my new jobs up to 70 so I can get back into Shadowbringers. So it is what it is. I'm just going to play it out, and, eventually it'll happen. And so right now I've been leveling Astrologian and Machinist, trying to get those both up to 70. So
gotcha.
We'll have to wait and see.
Well, I think we've reached the last third of the episode with this.
All right, class, settle down. It's time for book reports. Coniff, why don't you kick us off?
For our YouTube listeners, here you go. I'm holding it up to the camera for our audio only. I recently purchased the Barnes & Noble. It's like a paperback, leatherback. I don't know. I'm sure this isn't real leather, right? But it's all 3 Lord of the Rings books into one massive tome. And I love it. It's just simple. It's got that's the script, right? For the ring on it, maybe? Yeah, there's Elvish there. I'm no expert, but I finished Fellowship of the Ring. And so in this part of the episode, we couldn't be joined by our friend Ardeth. He is sick, and it's getting to be shark season, so he's just exceptionally busy. And so being busy and sick is terrible. So we're going to do this without him, but finished the Fellowship of the Ring. And then I also recently, because when I was sick in February, I watched Fellowship of the Ring movie. I watched part of the Lord of the Rings animated movie from the 70s and didn't finish that. And then I watched The Two Towers. And then recently, like within it would have been last week, I think, I watched Return of the King. And I have a lot of thoughts on the Fellowship of the Ring, having read it as an adult now. And I guess you didn't finish it. You got busy and stuff, I assume.
Yeah.
But you at least, you're aware. So I wrote this in my one note for this whole episode. I wrote this down, and this is kind of my too long didn't read concept here. I think that Fellowship of the Ring might be my favorite of the 3 books or movies. I will say definitely it's my favorite movie. And then the books, it is the most fresh. I'll have to read Two Towers and Return of the King to maybe see. But previously, I would have said Two Towers was my favorite, and that was in large part to the Rohirrim and the Rohan. I really loved the concept of the Horse Lords, just that lifestyle, that culture. The Helm's Deep battle is just simply legendary as far as film battles go. But Fellowship of the Ring it's like that innocence of the hobbits, and Peter Jackson did such a good job of capturing that innocence of the hobbits in that movie from beginning to end. That movie specifically, when finally Frodo and Sam realize what they're gonna have to do, and they set out on their own and break off from the Fellowship. I really, really love that look at the Shire and the life of the hobbits. And I used to, and a lot of people, but I used to not like the first 100 pages of Fellowship of the Ring, because that's all it was. Boring old Shire hobbit folk talking and gossiping, and there's, they use a word in that book that is not okay to use nowadays all the time to talk about the folk that are wandering through the Shire and Bree and west of the Brandywine, or east of the Brandywine River. And looking back, having finished the whole book, 100% my favorite part was from the beginning up until the Fellowship leaves Rivendell. Now, that's not to say the Fellowship leaving Rivendell and then obviously their journey trying to go over the mountain pass and then that failing and going into Moria, and Moria being Moria, and then going into Lothlórien and, down the river and all that. Not to say that's not good, but it just that world building that happens. And the Tom Bombadil stuff, as silly as and goofy as that is, there's so much character to the Shire. And when you contrast that with, and again, I haven't read Return of the King in a long time, but when you contrast that with what's going on in Return of the King and the weight of the whole world hanging in the balance of Frodo destroying this ring, like, it's just a simpler time. It's a happier time, a more innocent time. So that's my little, get your thoughts on it, generally speaking, before we look just strictly at Lothlórien in the end. But what do you think about that? Fellowship being my favorite of the 3 books, movies, what have you.
I would tend to agree. I, of course, read The Hobbit first when I was a very young kid, and so I have a lot of fond memories of, and grew a fondness for hobbits and that idea of hobbit life, and I guess it kind of resonates with me to a degree because it's just very peaceful and down to earth, and there are a little bit small towny, and that is conveyed, especially when Gandalf shows up, who you could see it in. If you were to kind of interpose a modern day setting, it would be, like a group of rural farmers just sitting on their porch, spitting tobacco into cans, and then all of a sudden some bigwig city slicker shows up with
John
an
Bon
iPod
Jovi shows up
or an iPad, and starts showing them like, what's all this magic tomfoolery, that sort of thing. And it's very, and I'm sure this happened over across the pond in England a lot too. We had rural farmers, and then the city slicker from London shows up and like, trying to sell a snake oil again.
Get your pitchforks, Martha. He's back.
Yeah, that, and playing Lotro too. With that was always one of my favorite things. I generally always made hobbits, and I would always start in Hobbiton, and it was just kind of fun. Just running around trying to deliver baskets of stuff to other hobbits, and the other nosy hobbits would try to, you would have to avoid them to get the little picnic basket over to some other, Took Baggins or something or other. It was always kind of just fun little quests like that all over the map. But and then getting to see, they had Bilbo's birthday party celebration with the big oak tree, and just all of that is just very kind of comforting. But the way the novels are juxtaposed with that, and like you just said, with the weight of the Two Towers and what the weight of the plot of the story is just kind of brilliant, because it just brings everything home. And you realize, and Frodo realizes, especially with Galadriel when she's showing him the pool, and these are the things that could, may or not be. And you get that whole thing with the
raising of the Shire.
Well, yeah, the raising of the Shire, and he sees that and it's like, oh no, that could happen. Like, yeah, that's that's the reality of the situation. So it's and Frodo might be the only Hobbit, maybe Sam too eventually, but Merry and Pippin might be a little bit ignorant of the whole situation.
Oh, for
to
sure,
be honest.
they are.
And then obviously the rest of the hobbits are completely ignorant of what could possibly happen. So Frodo and Sam kind of have this burden, and that's part of the burden of the ring is Frodo knowing, oh no, this is what could happen. And the rest of the races seem to know. The elves know for sure, because they've been around
They're leaving
forever.
in the Middle Earth.
They're like, yeah, outie, deuces, we're out. We're going back to Valinor, but and then of course the men know they've been fighting orcs and stuff, trying to get, Boromir mentions it, trying to get Osgiliath back, and Aragorn's seen it all over the map, being a ranger from and
the dwarves have been. The dwarves are a little.
they're kind of more closed offish, you know. They know it, but they shut the doors to it. So they're kind of isolationist.
Yeah, as far as like importance of the races go in the story, it's definitely, you know, the stories about hobbits that do the unthinkable. But then the second most important race is very clearly men, because it is the race of men that Sauron's trying to eradicate. And then you've got the elves, and, you know, they're sort of leaving, but they're still, you know, their last ditch effort, like by reforging Anduril and Haldir coming to the aid of Helm's Deep, you know, just that type of stuff. And then there's the dwarves that just their only part in the story is ultimately Gimli. You know, and from the book perspective, again, just Fellowship, because I don't remember the others so far, Gloin and Gimli being representatives at the Council of Elrond. So it's interesting to see that, you know, it's like the dwarves are not all that important in...
Which was a flip from the Hobbit.
Exactly.
The dwarves are kind of running hand in hand with the hobbits. So
so like hobbits, obviously the main characters of this story ultimately. And then, like you said, like the Hobbit book, dwarves are a huge part of it, whereas men are the men of Lake Town, I guess, you know, and Smog and all that. But then the elves, and, you know, they're just it's the dwarves and hobbits, and then. Again, the script is sort of flipped on the dwarves as far as the Lord of the Rings go. So that's fascinating. But so did we talk about Moria on an episode, or did we talk about going up to Moria? It has been so long.
I believe we did talk about it up until, because I remember talking about there wasn't a cave troll in the book.
We did talk about that.
But I didn't remember that there wasn't.
Well, but
I don't remember talking about Balrog, a Balrog, as Gandalf would say, a Balrog.
Well, as a quick recap, you know, like the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, they get into a fight with ghost wolves. They try to go over the mountain pass. That fails because, and while the movie makes a big point of blaming that on Saruman, the book is only kind of alludes to that. It doesn't outright say it. And so that's interesting. But, you know, then they go to the mines. The Watcher in the Water is a real brief encounter at the very beginning of that. But here's the deal that with Moria is that everybody knew, minus maybe the hobbits, but everybody knew that Moria was bad news, including Gimli. And in the movie, they make it seem like he had no idea. Like,
we did talk. I do remember that.
We did talk about that, yes. Yeah, and so Moria happens, and the's not a lot of combat.
What kind of news feed does Gimli have? Because in the movie, it's like, dude, what are you? Why? Yeah, you're the only one that's just like, oh, why? Like,
right. And so Peter Jackson took the opportunity of Moria to be like more of a chance to kind of show off the Fellowship in combat. You know, instead of doing the wolf thing, instead of, well, really, because it's wolves is when we first see them, the ghost wolves fight in the book. They don't do a ton of combat in Moria at all. In fact, the Fellowship hardly does any combat in all of the Fellowship of the Ring, the book. Truthfully, it's, you know, it's the wolves. That's like the only bit. And so, of course, this is a movie and you need to see some of that action. And so Peter Jackson took that opportunity to do that. Well, in the book, there's a lot of history to Moria that is kind of touched upon. Whereas, like, you know, Balin and his dwarven companions, they go to Moria to try to take it back. And like I said, Gimli knows that. Gandalf knows that. Aragorn and Legolas, well, maybe Legolas, know that. And so at some point when they find the tomb of Balin, that's Gimli's like, so he did die then, you know, like, because they had lost contact with Balin for years or something. And so they always kind of just wondered what happened, and that was kind of like a closure. But yeah, so Moria's very, very much they're more running around away from the orcs and that presence that Gandalf feels on the other side of the door, which of course becomes the Balrog that ends up pulling him into the Khazad-dûm, or the bottomless pit. So from that point now, once that all happens, there's a good deal of book between them leaving Moria, walking back into like the outside world, and then actually getting to Lothlórien. And what I found fascinating is the movies made a point, of course, the pacing of them probably helped about. Once Gandalf falls, it's just sadness up until they get to Lothlórien. And there's really not a lot of time there spent in the movie, but like that's the feeling of it. But then in the book, they're all having conversations and chatting pretty soon after that happens. Like they don't spend a lot of time on the grief, or it's not like a pronounced part of the story. And then of course in the book, like, they go into the woods because they're trying to go south again. The northern part of Lothlórien, they find Haldir, who's with a few other elf scouts. And there's an orc raiding party along with Gollum that's stalking the Fellowship. And so they hide, and then Haldir takes them, through Lothlórien, or eventually to get to Lothlórien. Well, I don't know what the woods are called there, but, he's taking them through there.
Yeah, just Lórien.
And I really like that. And Haldir, I really liked his character in the movie, The Two Towers. Of course, I'm, sad that he dies in Helm's Deep in that fight. But I always thought as a kid at Helm's Deep, those elvish, I think I had a Haldir action figure actually, but the elvish armor and the swords they had, it was like almost like curved katana, like scimitar type things, just the sickest looking, weapons and armor in my opinion. And so anyway, he plays a pretty central part in this specific part of the story, guiding the Fellowship all the way down into Lothlórien and to meet Galadriel and Galadriel's elf husband, I guess. I don't know the name. He's the king. I don't remember his name. He's not important compared to Galadriel, as Shiloh looks it up. But so
yeah, I'm looking it up.
It was this was an interesting part of the story, because once they hit Lothlórien, it's that feeling of sanctuary.
Celeborn.
It's that feeling of sanctuary, like nothing can really touch them there. But they do make a point of, discussing that like the ring can't stay there forever, because eventually Sauron will surround Lothlórien and burn it to the ground. And, nowhere is safe in Middle-earth from the ring or from Sauron eventually. And so they have to leave, and, she does all the gifts and stuff. I don't know. I enjoy that part of the book, but like I said, like that beginning up until Rivendell, where the hobbits are just so brand new to all this stuff that's going on. It's like there is that loss of innocence once the Fellowship forms, once Moria happens. It's like Lothlórien, it's pretty, beautiful elf land, but it's got that shadow underneath of like this task that has to be done. So
yeah,
I don't know. You have any thoughts on that at all? Like just the overall Lothlórien to the end. Not a lot happens between Lothlórien and the end of the book. Honestly, they're going down the river. I mean, aside from Boromir, succumbing to the wiles of the ring,
to the madness
of the ring.
No, I don't remember if it's portrayed in the book about the orc attack, that's in the movie.
That doesn't happen. It must be
Yeah.
two towers. It is two towers because I think there's a chapter called Uruk-hai and the Fall of Boromir, and it has to, right? Because Boromir dies. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Okay.
that doesn't happen at all in Fellowship.
In Fellowship, yeah, okay.
No.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I mean, obviously in the movie that is part of the Fellowship of the Ring movie, but I didn't think that. I couldn't remember, but I'm like, I think this is a little tacked on.
Yeah,
Probably just the way Jackson had it all scripted out. And like, yeah, we're just gonna move this over here, and
because
that'll be the
otherwise,
way.
like, yeah, you're getting.
And it makes sense because you can just say, all right, Sam and Frodo are on their own now, and
yes.
cutscene, and next movie. So.
And you get, I mean, if he would have done it by the book, like you'd get zero action from leaving Lothlórien to the end to the Sam and Frodo leaving, and so that wouldn't make a ton of sense. It does make a lot more sense if Frodo gets attacked, orcs start, Uruk-hai start attacking. He needs to escape. That little scene in the movie with Aragorn resisting the ring and telling Frodo to keep it safe or whatever he does. Like, that was a good send-off. Basically Aragorn being like, this is your burden. I don't want it. I'm not going to try to take it from you. And I think Aragorn knows at that moment that Frodo's going to go off on his own.
Yeah.
And Sam, is going after him too. In the book, it happens a little different because they don't know where Frodo has gone. And so they all go. And same with, Boromir comes back all dejected and whatever. And so all the hobbits and Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn go and look for him. And then Sam doubles back and is like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I bet you he's would be back at camp, and then that's when he sees him leaving, and it's the end of the book after that. But yeah, it makes more sense to end on that bit of combat, that high note, I guess.
Yeah.
Bit of action, but it's, again, I think Fellowship is, it's so cozy at the beginning, and then like all throughout, like you're just following these hobbits, and then by the end, when they break off and Sam and Frodo are realizing like that this is on them now, like there's just the tone changes once you get to Two Towers and so on. Certainly from the movies, but yeah. I really enjoyed it. We'll have to look at Two Towers at some point. I don't know when, no time soon. But I mean, I still have this whole thing that I need to go through. But I don't know. It's a really, I mean, it's a classic novel. It is a literary classic at this point. Yeah. There's not much more you can say, I suppose.
No, not really.
Do you remember all the gifts that Galadriel gives off the top of your head? If I could quiz you. Okay, let's hear it.
All right. Well, I the names in particular, the Elvish names, might be a little
just
foggy on.
whatever they are, because I don't even remember that.
Well, Sam gets a bit of Elvish rope.
Yep.
Which uses to some, at least in the movie, I remember there's a scene where he ties it off of a rock and he's like, oh no, how are we going to get the rope down? And then the rope just falls and lands by his feet.
Well, and he uses it to tie up Gollum at first.
It burns us.
Yeah.
Which it probably did.
Yep.
Let's see. Merry and Pippin both get daggers, which might be short swords for them, but probably daggers for a normal size human. That were, so they're the Barrow Whites, or the Barrow White in the book, was an old king, and I think there were two daggers that belong to some. Basically, these daggers are descendant or related to these old kings. So,
okay.
They get those.
See if I
Gimli.
can find it. Gimli's is
Gimli
the
gets.
easiest.
Yeah, he gets 2 or 3, just 2 strands of Galadriel's hair. I guess he's kind of infatuated with her, which can't blame the dwarf for that.
3 golden hairs.
Yeah. Legolas, I think he gets a new bow. I don't know. He gets an upgrade, like a +2 or something. I don't know. Frodo gets obviously the light of, I can't remember the name, elvish name. And I'm not totally sure what Aragorn gets.
It's a stone.
Really?
Yet maybe this will lighten your heart, said Galadriel, for it was left in my care to be given to you should you pass through this land. She lifted from her lap a great stone of a clear green set in a silver brooch that was wrought in the likeness of an eagle with outspread wings. Yada yada. So it might be the thing that Arwen gives him in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably.
So Sam does not just get the rope.
Get the rope.
No. In fact, she gives him, and she says, this will not keep you on your road, nor defend you against any peril. But if you keep it and see your home again at last, then perhaps it may reward you. And what that is a box
of like spices
of earth from her orchard. And the idea is that you will put this in your garden, and there will be few gardens in Middle Earth that will bloom like your garden if you.
Yeah, he was a gardener, so that makes sense.
Yes. I suppose Aragorn made out like a bandit here. He also got a sheath that fit his sword.
Wow.
Whatever. Aragorn or Legolas. Where do they talk about Legolas?
He's an elf. She's like, you get it. You have enough.
Boromir, she gives a belt of gold.
I guess, Boromir was still alive.
So Pippin and Merry, she gives a small silver belt. Legolas, she gave a bow such as the Galadrim used, longer and stouter than the bows of Mirkwood.
See,
strung
+2.
with elf hair. The Sam one is interesting, and then of course Gimli asks for hair. Well, yeah, and then Frodo gets
little
the
creep,
file.
little creepy,
a little bit creepy, but whatever. So that was interesting, and I think that is in the extended version, I believe. It's not in the regular version at all.
I think the regular, she just shows because they have to show. Well,
and
the cloaks
brooches.
obviously are a big thing, and then the light that she gives Frodo because
yes,
well,
and
spoiler,
it's used
but
later,
he uses it for Shelob. So
that's a good point.
I think that's the only one they show in the original. Which at this point, does anyone even watch the?
No. Well, actually, yes. When I was sick, February sick. Well, because it was on Amazon Prime, and I was like, when you're sick, you're like, of course, like if you're lazy, like you're even more lazy when you're sick. And I was like, okay, this is on Amazon Prime. I don't feel like getting my DVDs out and flipping discs halfway through. I just want to watch this.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was fine. Again, the theatrical versions are fine. They're great movies. It's just anybody who really likes that story, like, just watch the extended version. It's the full story. Well, it isn't the full story, but it is certainly. It's just more.
It's longer, more stuff.
Yeah. So, well, I think that puts a topper on Fellowship of the Ring. A really good book. I highly doubt anybody listening to this podcast has never read it or seen the movies. Maybe, reading it's a little more of an effort, but the movies at least. So you're familiar, with the story. I like looking at this type of stuff. Like it's like a piece of history at this point. Going back,
yeah, it
and
is.
that.
I think Well, I'm not old enough to really consider it a piece of just fiction, you know. For me, it's always been sort of a classic.
Yeah.
But I think now it definitely has become and kind of cemented itself as far as literature is concerned, a classic of literature.
Yeah.
But I could see maybe 10, 20 years before I was maybe in the 60s. Maybe it was still kind of in that fringe area because fantasy and sci-fi was still fairly new. But Dune was written in late 60s, I believe.
Yes, but this was written in the 30s and the 40s.
That was written, yeah, in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
But by that, and there wasn't a whole lot else written fantasy-wise other than
C.S. Lewis.
You know, C.S. Lewis.
Narnia, yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole... So it was a very, very niche thing. And so it really kind of... Nowadays, it cements itself as maybe like the grandfather. Like you would consider...
Oh, for sure, yeah.
EverQuest or something as being this great game, even though, you know, by all conventional standards, yeah, it did pave the way. But
unlike EverQuest, Lord of the Rings did age very well.
Yeah.
Obviously with the help of Peter Jackson's films.
Yeah, and it will continue to age. But books, they're kind of timeless, and games are not. So, spoiler. Hate to bring everyone on the Deborah Downer on a game-based show.
Except for Pong, baby.
Which is why we have Guild Wars 3, and why, you know, we just talked about maybe the fact of maybe WoW coming out with a new thing, and ESO maybe, you know, it's only part of... You know,
that's a good point, though. Like, and this is a topic for another time, maybe. But the concept of books are timeless. Maybe the language they're written in is not. I'd say like this is an example of that. Like, there's a lot of language in there that is just not used nowadays. But the story and the concepts are very timeless. Movies, in some capacity, are timeless. Maybe a little less so because of the techniques used. Like, you know, Gone with the Wind is timeless, but or a better, because I've never seen Gone with the Wind. Like Wizard of Oz, like timeless. It's telling a good story. Yeah. But then video games, like, you know, they're
unless it's telling a good story. So the underlying theme here is obviously story. So if you're telling a good story, that can be timeless or it can be dog doo-doo, depending on if the story is good or bad. Yeah. So
maybe we'll talk.
It's either
about
timeless or forgettable.
Future episode.
You could say that there are video games out there that would be timeless. I would consider something like BioShock pretty timeless.
Yeah, that's fair.
Half-Life, timeless. And there are plenty of them out there, but these tell stories, and so the gameplay changes and graphics change. Stories generally don't. They're pretty exceptional or they're bad. That's the way it works. Gameplay changes over time. What was good, probably not great now. What was good in 2004 is not good in 2024. So,
yeah,
there you go. They'll make a good story.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So, well, listener, thank you for joining us for episode 30 or 30 of Questing the Multiverse. We are so thankful you're here, listening to us, hanging out, listen to us chat games and movies and books and nerdy stuff. So we'll talk to you in the next episode.
It's Malong.
That was better than what I was thinking to say, and so
Questing the Multiverse is brought to you in part by Coniff Productions, Howes Wood Designs, and Joel Crawford. To follow along with our adventures, please follow us on Twitter at QTM Podcast and consider joining our Discord, a link of which can be found in the show notes or in our Twitter bio. Want your questions or comments read on the show? Email us at questingthemultiverse@gmail.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review or a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.